Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics Ukraine War Update Extra video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is where I give you the extra nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. I'm going to go for so much to talk about as ever, isn't there? I'm going to go first to this bit of footage of an SPG, self-propelled gun, and a howitzer being taken out, apparently by Excalibur projectiles. Although I've heard claims that this might not have been. They look walked in. I'll explain that in a second. But this strike is impressive on so many levels. Just one M982 projectile not only destroying the entire Russian artillery crew, but also hitting the exact spot to neutralize both the two S1 SPG and the Jiantzin towed howitzer. I assume the secondary fire from the SPG destroyed it. So here's the footage that Ukraine weapons trackers put up. It's actually slightly doctored. I'll explain in a second. So you've got oh, I want to take that music off, and you've got a really substantial explosion. And then actually this fire sort of carries on for some time, and then it sort of eventually cooks off, as you can see here. This is later from a different angle, and both pieces of equipment are destroyed. So it's a pretty extensive explosion. I'm going to show you the actual original footage, but I won't show you that big explosion because actually there are people involved there. So what you've got here is, first of all, turn the sound off. You've got an explosion that happens over to the right of it here, and so therefore the second explosion on here looks like it's a case of walking in the artillery. So you wouldn't expect that on Excalibur because they are precision, they're guided, and usually it just takes one, but it could be a couple of Excalibur. I'm not denying that. But what you see now is a bunch of people running away, as you would expect from this equipment, due to the fact that you see them here, due to the fact that there's a nearby explosion, shell has hit. So they all run away. Now, what's interesting now, and the reason I'm showing you this is a little bit of a discussion point, is right. They basically, or some of them, come back. Now, with artillery, you can probably guess there's a drone up in the air. So this is really risky. Like you've got a drone up in the air, you've got an artillery shell that's hit nearby. You all run away. That's the correct thing to do because they don't have time to hook this stuff up to get in and drive off. It's just run away, wait for it all to finish, and then see if you've got a vehicle to go back to. But then a couple of them come back, and that's where it all goes wrong because the second explosion, the projectile that's been walked in, if you like, from the first projectile. So the drone is communicating exactly where the first shell has dropped, and then will tell the artillery unit, you need to go, 50 meters to the whatever direction, and angles correct and all this kind of stuff. And then the second shell hits, but the guys are thinking, oh, they're safe, and they left it just long enough. And maybe the drone was waiting up there, telling them, wait, now shoot. There, you've got some guys running back towards the vehicles, so we can get them as well. And then a couple of guys get caught in that really big blast. So then what happens is a truck comes back and they drag one of the people who must still be alive back into the truck. I think they appear to leave the others, and we have the Russians actually coming back to help some of their beleaguered comrades, which is something we don't always see. But I guess it just tells you what the behavior is of when you hear shells. And initially, when that big explosion hit, you had people just the first reaction was to lie down. They heard it coming, and rather than just run the other way, they just went to lie down. And it must be because they heard that sound, and you hear that sound, you just want to almost get into the fetal position, the whistling munition as it comes towards you. But yeah, just this idea that run away. It's not about saving that equipment; it's about saving your own lives. And quite often people say, why don't they just drive away? Actually, like getting in the vehicle, um, turning it on, getting the engine going, and then driving off is a matter of maybe 20 seconds, and that 20 seconds is when those shells that have been walked in come by and hit you. So I think the received wisdom is to run away, wait till it's all over, and then go back and see. Anyway, that's a bit of footage. This is completely understandable, but shows some quite fascinating data here. Invasion of Ukraine has slammed Russia's global reputation poll, says a poll. This is Morning Consult, a US pollster. They've gone and looked at opinions around the world in a bunch of major countries, including Mexico and Brazil. The war has done a lot of bad things for Russia economically, in terms of their military capability and indeed capacity, etc., etc., etc. But it's also lost them an awful lot of soft power around the world, and people's opinion of Russia has plummeted, and that's not a good thing. So Russia's standing in all countries sampled collapsed in February 22 when it launched its invasion of Ukraine. Mexico is the only country to have a new positive rating. Oh, that's interesting. So let's have a look. So the Politico reports on this, saying data shows that Russia's standing in all countries sampled collapsed in February 2022 when it launched its invasion. Sympathy towards Russia tends to be higher in countries of the global south, such as Brazil and Mexico, which is the only country in the sample to have a net positive rating of Russia +5 than among large European countries, the US and Japan. So Morning Consult's dataset shows that adults in the UK have the most unfavorable view of Russia. And I was trying to work out why this is. And I guess it's because the UK is an island nation that has not had much to do with Russia. Although arguably, recently, parts of London have become, London-grad. There is this idea that we are the favoured place for money laundering for the Russian oligarchs. There's an awful lot of Russian money in Britain, and we have been complicit in, actually, you could argue tenuously, I guess, complicit in a war by funding it through our acceptance of Russian money willingly. There's a huge amount of money in London, and actually in our politics as a result of Russian influence. But anyway, uh, other than that, we haven't historically had a lot to do with Russia, whereas Europe, being on the same landmass, has closer connections, particularly as you go further east. But I don't know whether that has anything to do with this. But the UK has significantly poorer view of Russia than our European counterparts. The UK have the most unfavourable view of Russia, -79 percentage points, followed by Japan, -75. And feelings in the are shared. Sorry, these feelings are shared EU countries like Germany -68, France -68, Italy -69, and Spain -69. US public opinion appears to be slightly less hostile to Russia. Interesting, -62. What's going on there? Because 17 percentage points difference between the UK and the US is a fascinating one. I've never met anyone in the UK with pro-Russian sentiments. You might hear people like people who watch GB News who might be quite similar to, say, sort of Tucker Carlson, Nigel Farage, sort of very anti-EU, and therefore any enemy of our enemy is a friend. So if the EU is our enemy, then Russia is arguably our friend. There might be that element to explain why it's not 100%, but then is that what explains what's going on in America with that 62 percent, as opposed to a much higher number? Anyway, the results are here. This is Morning Consult's results. I don't quite understand how they get +5 for Mexico. So it must be some kind of average over the whole year, or something. But at the moment, it sits in a negative. I think -8 there. That's the last one. But either way, you can see that Mexico and Brazil have considerably higher favorability ratings than the rest of the world for Russia. Uh, you have I just don't understand Mexico, but I can understand Brazil with Bolsonaro, an authoritarian leader, where you've got really high nationalistic fervor at the moment. You've got a very similar thing to the January the 6th capital sort of insurrection thing, having just happened in Brasilia. And indeed, connections. There's some fascinating connections between the movement in the US and the movement in in Brazil. It's a really interesting connections between the Trump family and the Bolsonaro family, actually. But anyway, I won't go down that dodgy road. Um, so yeah, fascinating data, I think. So I'm going to bring you to this thread. I'm not going to read it out. It's quite a long one and goes into a little bit of detail, but it's interesting. This is Dara Masakut, who is senior policy researcher at the RAND Corporation, focusing on defense issues in Russia. And she basically says that the Russian organization, their defense, is now starting to look back. There have been these big sweeping reforms that have been going on for the last sort of decade or so, and they weren't fully carried out, and there were problems with them. But it seems like now that they are going back to a sense of their military from an era prior to even those reforms, and they just don't have the money or the personnel to do that. And she said, to conclude, there are other lessons to learn for them to learn, painful lessons, but those would require them to admit to themselves what they've done wrong. Russia don't seem to be very good at that, and what they've done inside Ukraine to Ukrainians and to their own. So far, that seems unlikely with Shoigu and Gerasimov. Watching this announcement, so this is what Shoigu's announcements about, reform and whatnot. Having watched these men for many years, I was left with the thought that sometimes an organization is so broken that it cannot fix itself. It's turning away from the solutions and resolutions that it previously identified and is looking backward. So it's like, right, we're going to reform this organization. The armed forces need huge sweeping reforms. And then we did them a bit badly. Then we go into a big war. We're found to be lacking in so many areas that we're going to go back to kind of what we originally believed and how we structured ourselves. Anyway, check that out for the actual details involved there. This is mobilized soldiers from Yaroslav Oblast of Russia retreated under heavy shelling on orders of the company commander. Now the commander is claiming he never gave an order, and the men will be declared deserters. They're asking for help to find a solution, and they talk about this. This is not atypical for Russian mobilized people to be moaning about their state of affairs. These guys are going to possibly get into a lot of trouble for deserting, but they are claiming they never deserted. Their commander told them to retreat and then denied he asked them to retreat. But what's interesting about this video, the reason why I've actually put this up, is look at their uniforms. Look at how many. This is just one. This is one unit, right? How many different uniforms can you see there? What does this tell you about the armed forces of Russia? How they're dressed? Fascinating. Yeah, virtually everyone there is wearing a different military uniform. The helicopter crash that happened yesterday was a really big blow to Ukraine. Very sad. The ministers involved, apparently, I've done some reading or got some opinions of different journalists who worked with them, who said that these these were really, like, the Minister for Internal Affairs and the deputy were really decent people, really nice and approachable, were good at their jobs, and had a vast amount of knowledge. So there's a huge knowledge base that's now been lost. And it's just, desperately sad, as well as obviously all the innocent people who died in that as well. The Economist here says the loss of the leadership as one of Ukraine's security ministries will have an immediate effect on the war effort. Mr. Monastrisky's ministry was responsible for coordinating the National Guard, Border Guard Service. So these are people who are fighting in Bakhmut as well. Police, emergency services, and part of the National's territorial defense forces. I mean, wow, what a massive remit. Much of these structures worked autonomously with their own managers, but some of the processes were personalized. So the death of senior officials entails a loss of institutional memory. Many questions are being asked about the wisdom of placing the minister, his first deputy, and the minister's leading civil servant on one helicopter. So you've got basically your three top people in that entire ministry suddenly dead. Imagine that. Imagine that in any department in government, in whatever country you're talking about, like the three top ministers suddenly going and then having to pick up the pieces the next day. And that's a huge loss. So Mr. Monastrisky, 42, was an important player in the country's National Security and Defense Council, though he had been in his post only since July 2021. I think he's already been at least temporarily replaced because obviously that's a really important position. You need someone there, but it's a real loss to Ukraine. That really big loss. Okay, the first USA package to Ukraine will be announced on Friday. Reports suggest that the package includes a large number of Stryker fighting vehicles and more Bradleys. I'm pretty familiar with the Strikers. This is a terrific vehicle, and he's going to talk about it now. So let's just get to know the Striker a little bit. So Mark Hartlin, who I've previously read you threads about his opinion on a Bradley. He fought in a Bradley in Iraq, I believe. In 2000, I was commanding 3-2 Armored Brigade Arrowhead when I received new orders to be prepared to field a new organization with new equipment. Our brigade would become the first interim brigade combat team and then later the Stryker Brigade combat team. While the Abrams tank is named for General Creighton Abrams, hero of the Battle of the Bulge, and the Bradley is named after General Omar Bradley, the Stryker is named after two Medal of Honor winners, PFC Stuart Stryker from World War II and SPC-4 Robert Stryker from Vietnam. General Shinesky, a personal hero and one of my mentors, drove the fielding. That's him in a suit in this picture. His idea: have an air deployable unit that generated great battlefield intelligence with vehicles that could bring lots of infantrymen to the fight quickly and quietly, influencing a bunch of tankers to give up their Abrams for a lightly armored infantry bus was tough, but they soon learned the power of intelligence driven operations. The Stryker proved their value in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, with even special operators wanting these vehicles. They are not a tank. They are lightly armored and have either a 50 caliber machine gun, a grenade launcher, 30 mm cannon with a lot of guys in the back. They are quick and quiet. Actually, you can have a main gun on top of these as well. Our division had a brigade of Strikers in Iraq, and they performed extremely well. There's also a strike. Oh, this here we go. There's also a Striker with a 105 mm gun, smaller and less powerful than an Abrams or Leopard 120 mm, but it's good infantry support. That's the same size gun as the French light tank, if you will, that is being sent. The cannon has some problems, and I'm not sure if the mobile gun system will be part of the package to Ukraine. We'll see. The wheels of the Striker are better than tracked vehicles for roads. The downside is they get stuck a lot. They're usually much easier to recover out of the mud than a stuck tank. Soldiers say they are easier to maintain, fix, and keep running, and they use much less fuel. The Friday package will likely include more Bradleys. I think there are 50 more Bradleys coming, which have more armor and stronger gun and anti-tank missiles tows. Ukrainians are training now at Grafenwöhr and Hohenfels in Germany. So on those already. A combination of these vehicles, HIMARS, M777 and additional T-72 or other tanks in the hands of the trained Ukrainian army will make a huge difference to offensive operations. Looking forward to hearing confirmation and news of what other NATO nations are providing. It's all going to be about Ramstein. I mean, that is a big old um, piece of news waiting to happen there. I talked earlier in my news piece on Olaf Scholz's decision or probable decision not to send Leopards, at least until America sent Abrams, and the absolute furore that has caused. Uh, a few, as my threads are full of very learned people and some Germans, as you would expect, uh, they have cast their opinions. So nobody knows why, but it may have to do with the party's close past with Russia. The SDP initiated the German Ostpolitik, which improved political and economic relations with the Warsaw Pact and maybe helped with reunification. The SDP has a hard time accepting that it's not possible to be friends with Russia, since apparently friendship worked once before and still has a lot of sympathy for them. This time, Scholz hopefully wants to let his new defense minister, Boris Pistorius, make the announcement on the Ramstein meeting to let Pistorius get a strong and popular image after the disaster that was the last defense minister. And another commenter, Kröter Nchmel, who is a common commenter on my threads, so thank you, said, I'd say the German non-delivery decision is a complex one. It may be, because I asked, I said, like, people don't just make decisions like stupidly, as in it's almost random. It's like, oh, I'm going to make a decision. Oh dear, that was stupid, wasn't it? People put thought into, especially these kind of political decisions. There'll be a lot of thought that goes into this. So then, what explains Scholz? It's easy to go, oh, he's just done what a stupid decision. That tells us nothing. What we want to do is understand why he's the sort of person that would make that decision, or who's he trying to please? Who is it? The fact that there is a segment of Russian society, edit, I meant to say German society, or people in the corridors of power, or um, people with vested interests in Germany who he is trying to appease here? Is there some kind of compromise to the decision making process, or does he feel that this would be unpopular, or are there other things going on behind the scenes that we don't really know? Well, actually, Kurta sort of hints at this. He says it may be a lingering pro-Russian sentiment here and there in the establishment. Schröder and Merkel made Germany hugely dependent on Russia after all, but it's also that the Bundeswehr is basically inoperational anyway, and it may be that they are reluctant to diminish German combat capabilities any further. So the army, German defense, is not in a good position. Is the claim here? Next point is that the defense minister just resigned and a new one is sworn in this week. So if Scholz acts on the former minister's suggestions, these may very well be bad suggestions. But overall, I'd say that in Germany there has been a huge traditional anti-war sentiment, and the German government don't want to be seen to be a warmonger and weapons exporter when the spotlights are on. It's really interesting. So don't underestimate the importance of the Second World War and its legacy on the German national psyche, and including politicians, and could that have something to answer for? I don't know. And this is very typical for the German government in general. They do big controversial decisions when the press's attention is elsewhere, and to a degree they can steer the press. It's an entirely different thing if Germany secretly just sends some tanks over. They would just tell the press to not really report on that. But if the tanks are requested from outside and an answer is wanted, the press spotlights are on and politicians will start their wiggle dance. So yeah, what is going on here? It's a really interesting scenario, and I just would dearly love to know what it is that's making Schultz tick, what's underwriting his decision. Incidentally, I talked about Sweden giving the archers today. It turns out apparently they've had their press conference. They've given 20 archers, which are self-propelled guns that are particularly good at counter battery fire, very decent bits of kit, and they've given 20 of them. I think they only have 48. A load of NLAWs, so these are ATGMs, anti-tank guided missile launchers, next generation light anti-tank weaponry. Sweden's given that, and 50 CV90s, which Christian Jonsson says is one of the best combat vehicles. So it's a decent infantry fighting vehicle. So that's great from Sweden. And lastly, here's a chap from my comment thread from this morning talking about, and he's from Croatia, talking about his ideas of Serb mentality and why there is pro-Russian sentiment in Serbia. Obviously, this guy is not going to be the biggest fan of Serbs, maybe. So take all that into account. But this is Dubravko Lisičić, I think. Jonathan, and so this is in response to what I said about Serbia and like how they have an anti-NATO sentiment, and that could underwrite what is their position towards the war in Ukraine and why it appears to be pro-Russian sentiments. And I was wondering whether it is truly pro-Russian sentiment as opposed to anti-NATO sentiment. And this guy says, actually, in accordance with our Croatian experience related to Serbs since 1917, so he's Croatian, I can confidently claim that Serbs will always be pro-Russian. It's true that they are against NATO because, and remember, this is coming from a Croat who will have a particular opinion about Serbians. So it'll be really interesting to see a Serbian talk about this. Because during the crisis in Yugoslavia and later in Bosnia Herzegovina and Kosovo, NATO forces prevented them from achieving the same goal that the Russians have in Ukraine. So that can explain why they are anti-NATO. Those of us who went through the war on the territory of the former state can confirm that what Russia is doing in Ukraine, Serbia was doing on our territory. At that time, the West was not interested in helping Croatia, but proclaimed a policy of non-interference, except verbally, and expected a quick victory for the Serbs. They even imposed an arms embargo on us, and thus contributed to what we experienced. For example, the genocide in Srebrenica, Herzegovina. In short, that did not happen. Uh, we defended ourselves almost without any help from the West and prevented the realization of greater Serbian hegemony over the other nations of the former Yugoslavia. If Serbia had succeeded, we would have suffered the same fate as Ukraine during Stalin's era and today. In a similar scenario, the West did not help Ukraine at the beginning, but as Russia did not achieve its goal in a short time, and by analyzing intelligence services data that show the ultimate goal of Russia, the Russian world, they realized that they had to get involved. The difference between our war and the Ukrainian Russian war is that now the West feels threatened because, in addition to the importance of geopolitics, Ukraine has gas, oil, and ores, which we do not have, and is the largest exporter of food along with Russia. The West must bring these resources under its control in order to prevent further devastation of Western society. There's a larger conversation to be had about why we go to war. So I remember having this conversation back when Zimbabwe and Robert Mugabe were in all sorts of trouble, right? And there are some connections with Zimbabwe to the UK, right? So there's some historical connections there. The question is, why don't we go into Zimbabwe? Because hang on, we went into Iraq just dead quick, and we went into Syria, Libya dead quick, and bombing there and all sorts of stuff. And then there's Syria. Or why do we get involved in all these places and not Zimbabwe? Well, Zimbabwe has no natural resources that we want. It's as simple as that. Oil, 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 nothing. Well, Zimbabwe, nah, we'll leave that. I know, yeah, terrible regime, it's horrible, but we'll just say very strong things about it. We won't actually do anything. So we generally get involved in wars where there are a lot of natural resources on the table. So he goes on to say, throughout history, Serbs have always sat on two chairs, one of which is Russian was Russian. The Russians always help them because they are interested in going to the warm sea. The Adriatic is ideal. There is also an ideal base for the Russian fleet in Boka Kotorska, Montenegro. Today, Russians can neither enter nor exit the Black Sea. Find out about today's events in Montenegro. What is the Serbian Orthodox Church doing there? Same as in Ukraine. What are pro-Serbian politicians doing also in Ukraine? What is the influence of Belgrade? The same scenario as in the Donbass, but one does not want to learn what the ancient Romans knew. Historia est magistra vitae. Example, the statement of the president of Serbia, Vucic, that you are talking about is with a fig in his pocket, the same Russian narrative, a statement that serves the current needs regarding the entry into the EU and situation in Kosovo. The Serbs were, are, and always will be a lying people. Obviously, that's, a highly controversial statement there and a massive generalization, but this is coming from a Croat that sees things in that way, like the Russians. Time will tell very soon, maybe after Vucic's return to Serbia, when he will have to explain to the Russians what he meant. And this is the Vucic, the Serbian premier, said that basically they stand by Ukraine, that the Crimea is Ukrainian, the Donbass is Ukrainian, so on and so forth. So verbally, really strongly supporting Ukraine over Russia in the war. So this Latin phrase just to say "Historia est magistra vitae," that is history is life's teacher. So the idea is we learn from the past, and uh, we can learn from the Donbass and apply that to Serbia, or learn from Serbia's past and apply that to Serbia's present. Anyway, there's just a little bit of explanation from someone from the area. I am not Serbian or Croatian, and so it's really great when people come along and throw out their expertise on certain matters. Okay, that's pretty much the end. Just a couple of things to say. I'm really sad about this. Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's prime minister, has resigned today. She's got no longer got enough in the tank, she said, to do the job. I really like Jacinda Ardern. Yes, I'm sit on the left of the political spectrum, and I'm a liberal, and she's like firmly in that ballpark. But actually, she's done some brilliant international diplomacy. She handled the mass shooting in Christchurch really well. She's actually been really supportive of Ukraine, given that New Zealand doesn't have a huge set of resources and is the other side of the world. It's a real shame. Here's a tip. So here's a bit of homework for you guys to do. If you want to see a couple of superb speeches right? She got standing ovation for her speech recently at Harvard, and this is to do with authoritarian politics and to do with democracy. So this is really, really important. It's also to do with the information space and disinformation and misinformation. This is a bloody fantastic speech, right? She got a standing ovation. Just go and watch it. Honestly, it is brilliant. So Jacinda Ardern, absolutely fabulous leader, in my opinion, and a real sad loss that she's resigning. And just because let's get some Antipodean speeches going at universities. If you want to watch another great speech, so these two are my just favourite speeches. I guess I've watched this several times. This is Tim Minchin, who's a comedian and songwriter and musician, and who's absolutely brilliant in his own rights. But this speech is fantastic. So absolutely go and watch that. It is superb. And the last thing I'm going to say is that, and it's to do with YouTube, is that I had one of my videos taken down. It was in violation of their guidelines, and I've been issued a warning. And I'm really, really, genuinely peed off about this. Like I was enraged yesterday. So it was a Ukraine War Update Extra about sound coverage, KH101s, Bakhmut, Bronk, and Boom. That was the name of it. And I went through this twice, and there was nothing controversial. And all they said was misinformation, and I then appealed it, and it failed the appeal. So I contacted them, spoke to someone, and they can't give me. So they banned me, told me I've done wrong, but won't tell me exactly where I've gone wrong. So I said, well, I can't. If I agree that I've done wrong, which I don't, I've gone through the video, and there ain't nothing in that. There's nothing in that video that remotely qualifies for being banned. But even if I have, like, I can't correct myself in the future because you won't let me know what it is. You won't tell me what the claim is, what minute it is, or anything like that. You've just removed it. I failed the appeal and a warning. And if I fail another time, then I get banned from doing videos for a week and I can't live stream. And so this really annoys me. Like, I'm totally annoyed about this, and all I can think is a Russian bot reporting me or something. Because anyway, that's just my little rant to you. There you go. Make of that what you will. Thank you. Take care. Please like, subscribe, and share. You can help out the channel all the ways down in the description below. I really appreciate all the help, and I will speak to you tomorrow.